Hey everyone, you are watching the Life After Athletics podcast. We are doing a quick video here with a friend of mine, and I'd like to kind of introduce him real quick. The purpose of this podcast is just to be able to talk to other people who are former athletes who have made the transition to business and share their insights, share their experience in doing that. We believe that there's a lot of overlap in the strengths that you possessed and what you cultivated as an athlete. And we believe that there's a big overlap in how that translates into business. And so we're excited to share other people's stories, share what they're doing, hopefully hear some good tidbits on what their failures have been, how they've overcome those things, and how they're utilizing their former athletic past in their current business. So without further ado, I want to introduce Jonny Holsten. He's a former Division I track and field and cross country runner. He's now a certified story brand guide and runs a marketing company called South Mountain Messaging. Jonny and I had the pleasure of meeting in college. Obviously, we ran together, and so that was where the relationship cultivated at its beginning. But we've been able to keep that relationship growing since we've both been out of athletics, and it's been awesome to see kind of both of us walking the similar path of entrepreneurship and be able to kind of experience some battles together and kind of rely on each other for some good insight. So Jonny, thanks for joining us. I'm excited to have you on here.
Tim, my man, thank you very much. This is a fun thing. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, of course. So I want to start and kind of give people a background because it's always helpful for people to understand, maybe where you came from and how you actually even got to where you are now. I think the path for entrepreneurship for a lot of people is just so wild, right? Like some people just dive headfirst into it. Some people stumble upon it. Some people lose their job and they're like forced into it. And so I think there's a lot of different paths for people and what people take. For you, transitioning from athletics, I mean, growing up, did you have that kind of idea of like, oh yeah, I'm probably going to be an entrepreneur. Oh yeah, I'm probably going to do those things. Just go ahead and take us through maybe a little bit of your journey and a little bit of your path.
Yeah, well, I always say my first entrepreneurial effort was like middle school, high school. Like I built a lawn mowing business throughout middle school and high school. So I grew up in Colorado. That was the first taste of entrepreneurship. And I always say I ruined myself in that because when you're young and you make 25 an hour mowing lawns and your friends are all making $12 an hour at Sports Authority, you're done. You're done. Because not because working it, there's anything wrong with what they're doing, but it's because you're not going to take half a pay cut. You've already just spoiled yourself and you've ruined yourself. So that was my start. That's where I began. And then out of college, started a venture that lasted a couple years, and then now I'm running a marketing business, and that I've been doing for a few years, and am loving every minute of it. So,
who inspired you to start what would you categorize that as, like a landscaping company?
yeah, lawn mowing, and then it was just really weekly cuts, and then odd jobs with landscaping. So um I think I grew up in a family with 6 kids, so money wasn't we had a great upbringing, but a lot of it was if you want something, if you want something like above and beyond, you're gonna have to pay for it. So I think a lot of it was just calculating how can I do that, and that's kind of where I began. That's what prompted me. But at the same time, my dad was a police officer for 20 years, a news reporter before that, and he was never an entrepreneur until when I was in high school. He went into real estate, became a real estate agent, and just did amazing. But I think he knew from his angle that there's so many benefits to running a business. It wasn't the path he chose at the time, but he was probably the biggest encourager of mine. I remember one day, I love telling this story because I was like shaking in my boots. He and I were driving around my neighborhood, and he's like, "That lawn needs mowed. Walk up to the door." And I was like 12 or whatever, and I was, oh my gosh, I could have thrown up on the driveway walking up the steps. I ended up mowing that lawn for 7 years, middle school through high school into college. It was my best customer ever. So that moment was honestly what started it all. And so I thank my dad for that. So,
Oh man. Yeah, that's like, it seems like that extra push that people in our life give us. Man, you just never know what's going to come from that. 7 years.
No.
That's got to be a ton of money that you made off that single door knock.
Yeah, I mean, for a young guy, $20 a week for years and then snow shoveling, it was like, and that client is like what really snowballed into me realizing, like, you see a long lawn, you offer to cut it. And I think I even did the first cut. I think what my dad told me to do was do the first cut for free, and then you can hire they can hire you moving forward if they want. Like, if I had chickened out in that moment or not had my dad to encourage me, like, those are the things you think about where you're like, what would have happened next? Would I have ever even gotten that off the ground? So yeah, that's the story I like to tell myself, or tell others.
Yeah, dude. I hear like a ton of stories, how like young entrepreneurs start, and it never starts with like somebody going out and inventing this sweet, awesome new concept. It's always just like, hey, what's the problem in the marketplace in front of us? How can I
Yeah,
solve it? Like, how can I just go? I'm gonna go door knock that guy's house. I'm gonna cut his grass. Boom, he's got an issue.
that's
I can
right.
solve it. Like that's like business 101, business basics right there. So I think a lot of people who don't have a business or aren't in kind of that entrepreneurial path, they kind of overcomplicate it and say like, oh, I'm going to need to do XYZ and create this new thing and just completely revolutionize what I'm about to do. When in reality, it's like, okay, what do people have an issue with? What and how can I solve that? And so I think that's like the perfect example right there. And probably gave you
Nailed
the
it.
roots in what you did after that. So I want to kind of, so let's kind of fast forward. I know you kind of briefly touched on it where, we went through college athletics. How was that for you? Did you grow up running? What was your athletic past, and how did you progress, I guess, through college?
Yep. So I started out running like city 5Ks and local road races in middle school. And the reason I realized I was good at running was I was playing tackle football in 6th grade, and I hated getting hit. I was not a good football player. And there was a practice where we had to like run laps, or we got punished and we had to run at the end of practice or something. And I like in a football field, you're not doing many half miles or mile intervals.
Yeah.
So that's when I realized, like, me and another one of my friends were like side by side, way ahead of everybody else. And that friend was a runner, and he told me like, you should run our next 5K with us or whatever. And that sort of like took it off for me. Um, and I realized like I was better, though I learned quickly. I was not as good as I thought I was. I was just better than all the football players at distance running. So a little bit of maybe false hope in how good I was, because once I went to run with the real runners, I realized quickly I was nowhere near as good as I thought I was. But again, a inciting incident that got me to take a step and go into running was that football practice. From there, I ran a lot of 5Ks around the city to kind of get into it, and then watched my times just drop and drop and drop and drop. And then went to college. Was on I loved my college experience, but nothing will ever top my high school cross country experience. It was just amazing. Best coach, best teammates, awesome. And that's a period in my life I loved, and I know we'll talk more about coaching, but I was not very good. I know it was something it was probably my best sport was running, but I was not all that good at it. And I had a coach who just really cared for me and really like didn't care how good I was, and all he cared about was like, what were my goals, what were my next steps. And I said crazy things to him like, oh, I want to make state, or I want to run this time. And he had a great poker face because I always believed I could. And I got very, very close to some of those things. But I wouldn't have even gotten anywhere close if I had a coach that wasn't as supportive of that. So that was my process. That was my journey. Ended up running. I actually had a bit of a scary like heart health issue my senior cross country season in high school. I thought I was done. It was your classic, like, I was told, like, if you run again, it's going to be months and months until we can get to the bottom of this. So kind of scrap all your plans. Lawn mowing was going great at that time. And so I was sort of like, all right, maybe this is my path. I had a disastrous season of senior cross country because I got cleared with like a week left in the season. Did like one race. It was awful. Thought I was done. Coach convinced me to come out for senior track last year just to kind of finish what I started. And on my literally very last day, like opportunity, I ran a time that basically got me in the door with a few of the colleges I wanted to run at. Grand Canyon was one of them, GCU, where you and I met. And like late May of my senior year, went to visit, was like, let's do it. And then that's how I ended up in college. So
Amazing. I actually didn't know that about you and the heart stuff. I had heart surgery my junior year
yeah,
of high school, open heart surgery. So that's a funny connection there, I guess, in our stories.
yeah.
You touched on it briefly about you as a high school athlete, having a coach that cared for you. Um, and that kind of allowed you and gave you the freedom to think and set big goals. I think that's something that's super important. But with big goals typically comes, from maybe the world's view or how other people see it, typically comes failures. And you kind of briefly touched on that, is like, hey, I would set these goals and like I got close to getting them. But maybe a lot of them or the majority of them or some of them you didn't meet. And so dealing with failure as an athlete, especially when you dream big and you set big goals for yourself to accomplish, is kind of just part of the process, right? And I think you and I both have probably had experience doing that. Most athletes do. They have this season goal or they have this bigger goal that they're trying to accomplish and they fall short. And I think one of the best things we can do as athletes, and at least what I learned as an athlete, was I'm going to set big things and I'm going to focus on accomplishing it. But at the end of the season, or when it's time, when I've kind of reached the timeline that I gave myself, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to look back at how far I came. And that's how I'll measure success. And so you're never living in that gap, right, between what you're trying to accomplish and where you are right now. You're always living in the gain from where you are now and where you started at maybe the beginning of the season, maybe it was a few years ago, whatever that looks like. And I think that gives a lot of people power in, hey, I was actually able to accomplish like a lot. And it is good for me to set lofty goals. And even though I didn't get there, I still won. Like, go look back at what I was able to do. Maybe you went further than if you had set yourself with a lower bar. And so going into that, I just want to kind of move along into the struggles of entrepreneurship, because a lot of people don't talk about this part. I think dealing with the concept that most of my ideas and thoughts are going to be failures in business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how do I measure? I got to measure success in a different form, because if I just measure it based on, hey, did this idea go through? Did it work? Was it successful? Then I'm going to be super mad at myself most of the time and falling short of where I'm trying to go, rather than looking at most of my ideas as being, hey, this is a testing ground. And so even though my idea might fail, what did it lead me to? Or what did it give me? What sort of insight did it give me to other ideas that I have? So to kind of go back to a little bit of your history, when you came out of college, most people kind of go through this where they don't find exactly what they want to do, right? Like that's a tough thing to do, where you just like, boom, you're done. One hit wonder, I hit the home run. I'm in where I'm supposed to be. For you, when you came out of college, what did your entrepreneurial path look like? Did you, I'm sure you had ideas. You were doing something for a couple years and then it transitioned into what you're doing now. But again, that's not seen as a failure. And sometimes people see that and view those opportunities as failures. How did it transition? Like, what did you learn from that kind of put you in where you are now?
Yeah. So, what I was doing, my first venture out of college, so I graduated in 2018, and my whole world was high elite distance running. Whether I wasn't necessarily the top of the elite, I followed the sport so closely. I had lived and breathed it. So naturally, in my mind, I was like, well, I can't go pro as a runner, but I should be in pro running. That's kind of my world. I should be involved in the pro running business. And so I got my license to be a certified agent for professional track and field athletes. That was my first business. It's called Propella Sports Management. And I started that by actually starting a podcast in college where I was interviewing. So I love podcasting, but I don't have a podcast now. So I'm so happy to be on your podcast. I started interviewing just the best distance runners in the world, and very quickly got best American distance runners, which usually means you're not quite at the top of the world, but you're pretty popular and you're really fast still. So that was what I did. that industry did not have a lot of like fun content, I would say, and still is now starting to, I'm starting to see a lot that is a lot like really good and really fun to engage with. But at the time, there weren't a whole lot of people having like not boring conversations with athletes. So I just started DMing and hitting up people to be on my podcast, talk about distance running. And I built that podcast. I think we did 30 episodes. I was getting about 2,000 listeners per episode at the end of it, which in a small sport community like that, I was pretty pleased with that. Anytime you have 2,000 people listening to your podcast, like that's a great feeling. I was thrilled with that growth.
Yeah.
We did it by interviewing popular people, and popular people would share it on their platform because there wasn't a lot of content for them at the time. So that's how we grew. We didn't have to pay them for any of it because they wanted podcasts themselves for publicity. They wanted to be on podcasts, and it worked. But I will say this, this was the only, that business ended up folding because not because of COVID, but COVID was just threw a huge wrench in the running community. So there was not an opportunity to make a lot of dollars at that point. So I was driving Uber essentially full time while I was building this business. And my whole plan while doing the podcast, I knew when I graduated college, I'm going to become an agent, and I'm going to have the phone numbers of all these people, and I'm going to have all these contacts. That was the goal from day one of that podcast. And then the very end, when I graduated, I pivoted. Had a huge network relatively in the world to kind of get my name out there. And that was the plan. So I started that podcast to get connected in the world. And then I pivoted from like the Capella podcast to Capella Sports Management, and had a couple clients that I worked with for probably about a year after college. Then COVID came in clutch, and just kind of changed things. So I can talk about that transition, but that was the first business I created. And I will be brutally honest. I spent a ton of time working on that. I didn't make a single dollar. And the reason is because in that industry, you make your dollars negotiating shoe deals for athletes. And there's only about 5 to 10 shoe athletes a year that go pro in professional distance running. That happens between May and June. And if you don't, and so if you get one person, you might get 15,000 in revenue that year. So you need to have a long runway or some other kind of way to pay the bills to stack those, because it might, even if you're killing it and you're getting 2 people a year,
yeah,
it's taking you 5 years to build a 6-figure business probably. And again, there's people who've done it faster and better than me, but that was the path I was on. So the first year I was licensed and able to sign people, COVID hit, and the NCAA calendar basically got canceled. Nobody knew if they were going pro or coming back for an extra year. And a lot of agents who were, I will say, craftier than I was at working around some of the red tape had already prematurely signed a lot of those people, which is a whole new thing I had to learn about. So there's a lot in that world that held me back from making dollars, but it was a great learning experience. And when all that happened, I was working on a freelance marketing project and just sort of realized like, this is the angle I want to go, because you can sign a new client any hour when you don't have to abide by the NCAA calendar. So that was part of my motivation for a transition.
Yeah. Yeah. So was that transition like fairly smooth where, hey, you were on your way out and then you kind of hopped in the driver's seat of this other business idea? Or was it like, hey, this, in your head, you felt, all right, this failed. What am I going to do? And then you were left with like this gap of, all right, what am I going to do? Do I pull myself up my bootstraps? Do I find a new idea? How was that transition for you?
Well, I don't think there was a moment where I was saying, I don't want to do this anymore. And I don't think that means I failed, because I have no doubt if I had continued that path, I would have kept driving Uber. I would have kept doing my thing. And perhaps even now, few years down the road, it would be a pretty good business. But I had just kind of encountered something else I wanted to do. And my process was, so maybe this will help someone who feels like they're kind of living in a tension of feeling like they want to close their doors on a business, and that's okay. I just didn't want to do it anymore. I
Yeah.
was fed up with a lot of the things in that world, and it's tricky because you can't, as an entrepreneur, everybody else gets to say, "Oh, I found a new job." Entrepreneurs have to almost get spanked and in front of everybody they know say, "That business failed," or "I'm starting a new venture," or "I quit that thing."
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
that is a humiliating experience. So I lived in a lot of shame, I would say, about that for a while, of like, this business failed. And it's been 2.5 years. I just now am starting to be like, that was not a failure. You learned a lot. You're applying it now. And you started another business, one that's working a lot better. So sometimes it's the story you tell yourself, and then other times it's just the misperception from people who don't understand the entrepreneurial world that can make those experiences really embarrassing. So when I was in the middle of it, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I took a month off from my agency business. I emailed my clients and I said, I'm taking a month away. And I had 3 clients. I was gaining some steam, but I said, like, things are really tough right now. I'm going to take a month to think about it. I took a month. I just took the pressure off myself, and they were all very understanding. I just continued to drive Uber, which was my revenue source. And I just took the pressure off myself and
Yeah.
really thought through it and came to the conclusion that it was time to be done. And do something else, is where I landed.
Yeah. Well, I really like the way you put that. Like everybody else gets to just say that they changed jobs, and we have to just live in shame of like, ah, man, publicly, you told all your friends, you told all your family that you're doing this
Yes.
thing, and then you're transitioning to a new path. And man, I love what you said, because I've gone through that myself. And the most powerful thing we can begin to do is, instead of looking at that as like a failure or wasted time or wasted money, it's not. Like, everything that we've done to this point in our life will help us with our next thing. And so that's one of the important things, and why we're talking right now is like, hey, all of the things that we did as athletes, that wasn't wasted in vain. Like, just because we didn't go pro and continue running after college, which might have been the goal for the majority of our life, right? Like, that might have been just like, man, that would be awesome. That was my expectation. That's what I told everyone I wanted to do. That's what I was planning on doing. Just because that didn't happen doesn't mean that all the time was wasted. Especially like when you think of athletic skills, like yours and I's, where it's like, hey, nobody cared when you graduate college. Nobody cares about how fast you ran. You ran an 8K. I mean, it's like, all right, well, it's maybe impressive if you're like able to just kind of casually shoot some times around because their mind are blown, but nobody actually cares.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, that was a harsh reality of mine when I transitioned out of college. For me, I went and got a job, and I was like, kind of similar role to you, where I was like, all right, I'm going to coach because that's my arena, right? Like, that's what I'm used to. So I went and got a little coaching gig at a high school, with the plans of starting up maybe some private coaching. But in the meantime, to pay the bills, I was working at Starbucks as a barista, and realized pretty quick that, like, literally you go from like being treated like a king in college athletics, like everyone cares about you, everyone's like serving you the platters now. But to
Yeah.
realizing like, hey,
And
I'm talking to my coworkers.
we didn't even go to like a Power 5 school, like, and
No.
we were still treated very well.
Yeah. Yeah. And then having that realistic, that realistic view of like, all right, the person I'm talking to, the barista that I'm working with right now, they have no idea, like, what any of the stuff is that I did. They don't know what the decathlon is. They're like, is that like an Ironman triathlon kind of thing? And then, they just don't care. Like, it just doesn't matter to them. And so none of the hard skills that I learned, like jumping far or running fast, translated, but all of the soft skills that I learned as an athlete, goal setting, there's a wide list of them, have transitioned really well. For you, in your previous arena of athletics, for you, what has been some of the things that have transitioned well for you into your business now? And we can kind of go into give me a list maybe of a few things that have maybe played out in your current day-to-day life now. And then we'll kind of jump into maybe what was your standout skill as an athlete, and then how does that really fit in your business?
That's great. Off the Obviously I've thought about this heading into this podcast, but off the top of my head with where I'm thinking right now, I think the like three things are schedule and routine is the big one. Is the first one for me, is learning how to follow a routine, stick to a schedule, no matter what's going on. And having certain things that you need to do and you need to get done, whether it's a deliverable or sales or your marketing or client calls, whatever it is. If you don't do certain things, you're not going to either make money or you're not going to grow your business. And setting up a schedule to prioritize those things is a must. So I think I learned in school, like in college, hey, and of course, as a business owner, there's freedom with a flexible schedule, but that is a slippery slope. So I have basically never let myself take advantage of that. Like I am working these hours to these hours, and I am doing this during this hour and this during this hour and this during this hour. And then there's wiggle room in certain areas to roll with the punches. But that's the first thing, is if it, and that's for me specifically. Some athletes, like, they did their training different than me, but for me, I had a routine and I stuck to it, and that's what got me far. And that's the same thing that's going to get me far in business.
Yeah. And that right there is probably the hardest transition, I would say, coming from being an athlete where you have this rigid schedule, especially in college, and you have like your training plan and you have all these things just pre-written out for you. Like, we're not the ones developing them. And we just have a schedule that we follow. We're very rigid. We do these things. Hey, you're going to class, you're going to your team meetings, you're going to practice. Here's when you get on the plane to go to your meets. Here's the schedule for the entire itinerary for the weekend. So you're given that stuff. So we're used to rigidity. But when you transition into entrepreneurship, the difference is not, hey, I had structure before and now I don't, because you need structure. The difference is, hey, I had someone giving me the structure. Now I have to make the structure for myself. And that's the hardest part. And I think that's one of the things that's tough for new people transitioning, is they think, all right, there's a lot of freedom in what I do now. I can kind of work whenever I want. I can do these things whenever I want, which is true. You have the ability to say no, and you have the ability to take a day off. But that comes with the double-edged sword of you are in direct control of how you make money. So whether you show up or, be lazy on a day or whatever, that's going to directly impact your ability to make money as a business owner. And so, coming up with that routine, you sounded like you did a good job. For me, that was a tougher transition. It was like, all right, I spend a year in real estate and I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I have so much free time. And then figuring out like, oh, but like, free time doesn't always mean that I'm accomplishing my goal that's in front of me. So I need to like add some rigidity into this. I need to come up with like a daily schedule. I need to have things on my timeline that I need to get done so that I'm pushing the needle and moving it forward. So yeah, that's crazy. So you transitioned, you came out of college, you started a business that was within sports still, and then you transitioned into marketing. For you, was there, you probably didn't feel the imposter syndrome when you were working with athletes, because that's kind of your whole past background. When you transitioned into marketing, did you ever feel like that imposter syndrome come up? For me, I did when I transitioned into real estate. It was just like, this is a new arena. So I was like, I don't know, like, are people going to take me serious? I had no idea.
Oh yeah. And I still feel it every day, because I think the way most of us are, specifically athletes, if you start a business, for the most part, you are going to want to be pushing the needle and breaking into new arenas all the time. And I think, like, I had a conversation with my wife the other day where I was just like heated because trying to do big things and some big things weren't happening. And she's like, have you ever thought about like what you were doing a year ago, dude, or 2 years ago? Like, has that even crossed your mind? And there's the gap versus the gain stuff. I do live mostly in the gain, but if you're always trying to do new, exciting things, and I'm not talking about the never-ending treadmill of more money, more this, more that. I'm just talking about pursuing awesome, excellent things and being good, really good at something. that is where I find myself a little bit driven. And so if the revenue isn't reflecting that, or if I break into a new arena, you're going up levels. You might master a certain thing, and then you want to start a new product or offer a new thing. And now all of a sudden you have, even though you've got a huge body of experience with one thing, all of a sudden you're fighting imposter syndrome again with this new product, or in your sales language with someone when you're trying to sell it. And it can be crippling at times. I've felt it, and I think probably everybody listening to this, if you're wanting to pursue being super good at something, you're always going to feel like an imposter at all the time in different areas. And the best tip I've heard is if you have imposter syndrome, you're probably not an imposter. If you are a greaseball who's not feeling any shame about what he's saying, and you're just trying to make a quick buck, then you are. If you're self-conscious that you are not delivering or that you are not doing a great job, that means you're probably holding yourself accountable. So that's what I have to tell myself all the time.
Interesting. I like that. That was a breakthrough that I had recently, was just like this idea of imposter syndrome, and almost like leaning into it and being like, no, like that's probably a good thing. Like the fact that I feel this right now is meaning that I'm pushing the needle and I'm moving forward into uncomfortable areas that I haven't been in. And so it only lasts for a while, right? And then you break through and you're like, okay, like, yeah, I can do this. This is part of what I want to do. And then, after that, it's like, all right, where's the next, like, where am I moving next kind of thing? And so it kind of comes in these waves of like, all right, well, I'm pushing into a new arena, and then, okay, now I'm comfortable. Now, where do I push? So kind of going back to the strengths that you had as an athlete, and how they transition into your business now. What would you say, you kind of listed out a couple, but like, what would you say was your standout skill as an athlete? And it doesn't have to be one of the hard skills, right? Like it's not necessarily running. What's one of those standout soft skills that like you would consider your superpower as an athlete? What made you what you were? And how are you seeing that in your business? It might be what you had just said.
That's a really good question. I think on my cross country team, I was always, I think I'll just use cross country and maybe track as an example. Like I was on track's a little different because it's a bigger team. So, me from a track context is probably a little bit different than a cross country context that some of my teammates know me, because across country, I was team captain. I was organizing everything. I was, when we had if coach was speaking and she wanted to hear from an athlete, I was probably the one she went to for a couple of years, not all 4 years, of course. You gotta earn that. But I think like my strength was really learning from people who were better than me. Like just Sam Proctor, Sam, best man at my wedding. He was a third year or fourth year guy when I came in as a freshman. He's as a tall, skinny white dude. He's a short Ethiopian distance runner. He was my idol. I was like, well, I'm going to do everything this guy does. So that was, I think, the first thing I learned as a youngster. And we're talking imposter, low on the totem pole type situation. That was my superpower. I think I recognized there's people doing it better than me. You just need to do what they're doing for the most part. And then as you gain maturity, you can tweak things to your skill set. That's the first thing. And then I think the second thing is it is that lead by example. I think too, in bad ways, sometimes it was easier for me. Like I say, routine is the thing to follow. Like it wasn't that hard for me to stick to a really rigid routine, because it's the way my brain is operated. I would not miss a mile. It truly was not hard. I know I sound like a jerk for saying this. It wasn't hard for me to get up every morning and run 10 miles. It was not hard. So that's a good thing, because it's lead by example. But there were also times where I had those moments to teammates and the same negative thing comes out in my life and my marriage and all these things. But it's like some things are easy for some people and hard for others. I thought it was that easy for everybody. So there were times when people weren't clicking, and it would be like, sometimes people need to hear it. Hey, it's not that hard. Just do it. Other times that's not the right way to go. I do think as I got older, I learned how to balance that and kind of take things more case by case as a leader on a team. And not everybody needs to be told it's easy. Like, in fact, most people don't. So, right, like, I think that's that was something I learned to like balance that a little bit. But for the most part, it was learning from people who did better than me. And then hopefully when it was my time to be the one that was doing things better, putting it on display for the younger guys so they could follow it and have someone to go to.
Yeah, dude, you transitioned really well into where I wanted to go with this too, because you just talked about a dynamic that I came across. So Jenny and I volunteer coached at a high school track this past spring, and it was a really good reminder of how to coach different types of people. And you talked just like that, like, how do I speak to different types of people? How do I convey the same message? And something that's easy for me might not be easy for them. And so how do you kind of focus on that? I want to lead into the next topic of like leading ourselves, leading others in business, and specifically probably in the realm of coaching, because I think that one, being on the athlete side and getting the coaching, you can see and you can realize when a coach does this really well, when they speak the same message differently to different athletes. So like they speak in the language that athlete is going to kind of resonate with. And this was like a skill then that I got to see on the coaching side this past spring, was just like, hey, what was easy for me, or what I need all of my athletes to hear, I might not say it the same way. And so I found this newfound value and love for coaching, because like there's a massive impact that can have in how people in your coach's ability to speak to you or connect the dots for you and kind of lead you to those light bulb moments. Right now, how are you how do you lead your clients? Do you take that coaching role at all? And kind of maybe give us background. Actually, we've talked about your business, but what does your business look like? Like, what are your typical clients? What do you do for clients? And how do you maybe kind of take that coaching role? Because we've been coached our whole lives. So it's kind of like this easy transition for us to be like, all right, here's how this will look. Because I do it for me and with my clients in real estate as well. What does that look like for you?
Yeah. So right now, my business is helping clients find the right words for their marketing. And the way that I do that is through the StoryBrand framework. It's a framework I'm certified in and get trained in all the time. And that framework applies to any marketing material you can make: website, emails, social media, podcasts, presentations, all that. So my job and what my business does is we create that framework for businesses. And then now we're heading into more of a space where we're helping them not only create the framework, but apply it to the ways that are going to help them make as much money right away and then get more leads, grow their business. So, and there's an example of my imposter syndrome where originally I can stand firm saying, we can master this framework for you. We're certified in it. I live it and I breathe it. I can kill this framework for you. Now, as the business grows, we're taking it from we can master this framework for you to now we can master this framework for you and help you put it in the right places to actually make a lot more money and get huge return on this and make more sales. And so when you start to make those claims, that's where it's like, okay, those are big claims. So when I feel that imposter syndrome, I need to ask myself, how can I guarantee how can I just see those things through and make sure I deliver rather than fear and not say them? So there's a side tangent, but that's the business now. The coaching, I have an actual coaching offer. So literally from a coaching perspective, the goal is to kind of figure out what's the goal of the client. Is the goal of this client to whatever the goal is, you need to coach towards that goal. So is it to make more money through a specific email sequence, or is it just to have really clear words on their website because their website's messy? So coaching to getting them to A to Z. I want to do my own A to B to Z because there's some things that I prefer to do and I love doing. But as a coach, I've had to learn to let the client lead and figure out what their goals are, and then I coach them to get them there. I think that's the first way that coaching applies probably to anybody. Is there are sometimes you need to tell the client what the goals and what the objectives are, and then you get them there. There are other times you need to lean on them to make that decision for you. It depends on the context. That's sort of where I think, and then as I go through a project with a client, we are kind of coaching all the time, not necessarily telling somebody what to do, but asking questions to help people arrive at conclusions that are going to help us do our job better and make their marketing better. So like a coach, a genius coach empowers an athlete to basically come up with the idea that the coach wants to just say to them directly, but knows that might not be the right approach for them. So for us, sometimes that's what we have to do on intake calls. We have to ask questions to create light bulb moments. So that way there's buy-in from the client and we can all run forward and I can coach them better. There's kind of an example of how I might weave some coaching into a non-coaching situation. And then I have team members that write for me. So coaching their content, and that is coaching. Like when I work with a client that has an existing marketing team, I'm coaching them on the content that they create. And the best way I do it is the old compliment sandwich, right? So like, even if it's something that's disastrous, most people, unless you are a specific Enneagram, and I'm not an Enneagram expert, but most people don't want to be told super directly. I actually want to be told what sucks. Like I want to be told, I don't even want to be, I don't want anything sugar coated. Like I don't even want to hear what I did good. I just want to know what I did bad so I can fix it and move on. Not everybody's that way. So learning to speak to people like, okay, this line was really good. What you did here was great. I see exactly what you're doing here. You're thinking the right way. Here's how I might change that. And then the piece would be great. get that sandwich going. So I run it in coaching all the time. I haven't really started coaching formally until like the end of last year and this year. So it's a little bit new to me, but you're right. We're coaching all the time. So yeah, that's a great question. It makes me reflect more than I probably don't sound all put together on it, but I'm realizing now it's prevalent, right? It's everywhere.
Yeah. And I mean, our yours and I's relationship is like dynamic, right? So like we've been teammates, we're friends, and then we also work together like in business. And you've helped me, I get coaching from you and you help me develop my messaging. And it's been it's been funny because I'm reflecting on this as you're talking, and I'm thinking, because you just mentioned like, oh yeah, and then I kind of like help them basically grasp a concept themselves and it becomes their own idea, and then you're there to help foster that, right? Based on getting me to like my goals, let's say. And you've given me tremendous value in terms of being able to clarify my vision and getting really narrow on, okay, what exactly am I trying to say? And then let's figure out 15 different ways to say it. And so it's like you're coaching me on how to coach. Like it's just kind of this really cool dynamic. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about, all right, we'll be on a coaching call. You'll be kind of sharing some insight on some stuff. And then like a week will go by and I'll probably text you out of the blue and be like, hey dude, I have this amazing idea. Here's what I'm going to do. And then you're probably like, dude, I told you that like a week ago. And it was just like, it took me a week to like implant it in my mind to be like, oh yeah, this is my idea now. So,
hey, well, no, I mean, I wish I could take credit for all that. Some of it's accidental, some of it's not, but it's funny. I will say a win for you though. I had somebody else who's not like a real mutual friend of ours, but he knows you. He asked me, he said, oh, so is Tim Johnson helping other athletes like build careers as real estate agents? Boom. And I was like, let's go, baby. Yeah. So that means, so your side note, your messaging is really getting out there. But that's something that is a good example there. Like, and to reflect on our relationship, originally when we started talking about this project, or kind of how we've been working, we've been doing some bite-sized coaching. The original conversation was like, I want the whole enchilada and we are going to go all in on this project. And I was like, sweet, let's do it. That's my favorite project to do for clients. Let's go. And then as time went on, we kind of both probably realized like, okay, yes, that would have been great, but first we need a little bit more of a foundation before we put all the energy into this bigger project. That's something I've had to learn as a business owner too, is like, let's get people to quicker wins faster, as quick as possible. And it's something I've been working on, where it's like sales process example. Maybe there's a huge project that this client needs done and they want to do it, but there's just a lot going on and it's a big decision. And the easiest thing to do is just say, let's just do an hour advisory or an hour strategy session every week until we feel comfortable moving forward with this. Get some little wins, show people I love this quote. It comes from another coach of mine. Show people what it's like to work with you before they work with you. So if you can do that in bite-sized chunks and get little wins as a coach before big things, it's going to make the big things that much more successful, really.
Yeah. No, I love that. as you've grown and people, when you kind of go down this entrepreneurial path, you start a business, you're wearing a lot of different hats. Even though you run a marketing company, you were the marketer, you were the sales guy, you're all these things. You're actually providing the service, you're doing everything. And so as we grow, and you and I are kind of both in this same venture as well, like in our paths as we are continuing to grow as entrepreneurs and business owners, how have you seen kind of building a team around you and being able to serve your clients? You mentioned you've got some people doing some stuff for you. How has that, one, impacted you, and two, impacted the people that you work with? I think of building a superstar team as, I used to not think it was a big deal, because when you start out, you're hungry, right? You want to do everything yourself. You want to get the max amount of money. You don't want to necessarily, you might not have the money to pay someone out like a little bit from what kind of you're making. And so, but as I've grown, it's like, wow, like there's a lot of things that I don't like to do in the business, and there are some good things that I have massive strengths in. Where should I be putting my focus? And building a superstar team kind of around me has helped to elevate the weaknesses that I have. And then it's taken a lot of my plate to where I can spend more time on my strengths. How have you kind of seen that kind of play out, one, in your business? Sorry, I'm just recapping the question.
Yeah.
How has it played out in your business? And then how has it played out with serving your clients?
Great question. This is very new to me, so I want to make sure I make a disclaimer. Like, what I say is, I think it's based on real experience, but it's also based on limited experience. So don't take this as the end all be all, which is important, because a lot of people listen to podcasts and want to make sure I'm being like honest. Like, I'm not an expert team builder, but what I've learned so far is, right now I have 2 team members. So I went from being a one-man show for everything to adding 2 team members pretty quickly, close together, because it did compound a little bit. I was able to do more faster when I had other people helping me. So I think the jump from like 0 to 1 person helping you is probably the hardest. And then the jump from 1 to 5 is probably easier. I don't know. I'm not there yet, but I can sense it being better. How it's helped. I think my 2 team members, I'll talk about each of them specifically. One of them is, I would say, an extension of me. He knows the story brand framework very well. He writes a lot like I would write. He thinks about projects very similar to what I would think through. And recently I was handling all the work for a client. We had certain project deliverables each month. I turned it over to him. We just had our first month review, and I was like, I did all this stuff. Like, it's amazing. This guy's an extension of me. So I think we need that. I think that's the first part. When you start with that solopreneur route, like having someone who you can lean on as an extension of you will save you a lot of time and energy, and fixing things. And there's a training period no matter what, but fixing and training and making someone think like you, finding someone that already thinks like you, that could be an extension of you. Maybe you find someone who's already certified in a certain thing. This guy knows and breathes story brand like I do. So that was the first step. Finding someone who's an extension of you might be the first step. And then now, so he helps me with projects. He's not client facing. He just helps get projects across the finish line and do good work. My other partner, which was the bigger leap of faith, is my business development rep, who is the client point of contact now for sales. And he has experience in a longer sales process for higher ticket projects, where many of my projects are in the $3,000 to $10,000 range. Sometimes it's 1 call close, sometimes it's 2 call close. Now we're working on projects that are much higher, where there's an executive team and sometimes fiscal funding involved. So it's a longer sales process. And the first time he handled client, like being the point of contact, it was a leap of faith, but he nailed it, and it's gone great. And that's because he's different than me. So my other team member is an extension of me. For my sales guy, I needed someone who's more like less of a geek about story brand, because I'll start talking over what the client really needs. And I start talking like story brand, because I'm a geek over the framework. He's better at sensing what the client really wants and needs, and then behind closed doors, keeping me in line and saying, I don't want you to say story brand. I want you to say, improve the drop off in the middle of your marketing funnel. Like, those are the things this client cares about. So he's able to make it actually more meaningful for the customer, because he's able to sense their problems faster and easier than I am. Then I can help apply the StoryBrand framework to solving those problems. But that's been there. I think also the one thing I've learned with him being different than me is, like, it's been so fun having someone to just put our head, like we've experienced a ton of losses recently. I've talked to you about this like offline. So like things are good, but I'm coming through a period where it is the most like heartbreak from a business standpoint I've ever experienced in my life. And heartbreak sounds dramatic, but it's like it's personal when it's your skill and something you're good at. It also feels personal when it's your livelihood. So the more that things fall through, I've just had these like God why moments, and having someone that doesn't think like me to talk to has been so helpful. And it's just helped me stay a lot calmer and a lot cooler during all of this. So find someone that's like you, find someone that's different from you. That's about the only only advice that I can have, and know where to keep those two people.
I love it. I love it. That's good advice. Yeah, I think that'll be a topic that in a future podcast, you and I will have more experience and we can share more insight into that. And I'm excited to see how that progresses too. All right, well, let's, move into kind of our last segment here. What sort of advice do you have? And maybe I can chime in too after, but what kind of solid advice would you have for a current, somebody who, maybe they're in that, Division 1, maybe they're a runner right now, or maybe they're currently competing as an athlete and they're thinking, hey, I'm ahead of the game. Like I want to figure out what I want to do after. What kind of advice would you give to like a current or even former athlete eyeing entrepreneurship? I think some people know that they want to do it. Some people aren't sure. Some people are forced into it again, kind of like what we talked in the beginning. What sort of advice would you give to somebody in those shoes?
That's great. I'll do the 20-second cliche and then I'll get into some real meat. But the cliche would be find something you love to do, find a way it solves a problem for somebody else. That's really the core thing. That's going to save you a lot of trial and error. And then it's also going to save you a lot of embarrassment of trying different things. And that's okay if that's what you do. But if you can, if there was a time, not in the other business I started, but a time kind of between, I was trying to kind of microwave a business that was going to be like an instant success when it didn't solve a major problem. And it also wasn't something I loved to do. And so it was like a couple of months where I was kind of trying to put together this project and it was just not fun at all. It was terrible. It was awful. So, I learned probably even more from those couple months than I did from anything else in my business, because I wasn't really passionate about what I was doing and selling was terrible. It was hard and it wasn't solving a huge problem. So it just made it all an uphill battle. So if you can find something you love to do, position it in a way that solves a problem, you're going to start on second base rather than home from the plate. And that's the first one. And then I think the other stuff that is just that I've experienced personally, this is what I've experienced personally. Not everybody has had this experience, but like you have to really not value security, which is funny because in the early days, I think the ultimate goal of the business is to build this like powerful machine that is like an ultimate security vehicle for your family. But I'm not there yet. It takes a long time to get there. And I used to have this idea that like, oh, I need to be secure. I need to have all this runway and I need to have all these things. And like I was talking to my counselor a couple weeks ago and I was like, oh, I really value security. I said something like that. And he's telling me, he's like, what in your life indicates you value security, bro? Like, like you walked onto this team as like the worst runner on the team. There's no social security there. You started a business with $0. You literally spent the last 10 grand you had to get certified. And that 10 grand was a PPP loan that got forgiven. There's some real business talk there. And then started my business on that. And like, there's nothing that indicates I value security. I think I tell myself that because, of course, in the back of my head, I want that. So I think figure out what you value and what's important to you. And if you really value security, find a way to make your business more secure. Because I have grown my I've bought a new house. I've added a baby to our family. And before, I didn't really value security, but now I'm like, okay, I really value security. So I'm able to craft a business that promotes that a little bit. But if you value security, don't place a huge stake on it. And if you do, be hyper aggressive on building a business that provides security or provides whatever thing you need to live a happy life. I think that's the first part. Be in touch with and in tune with that. And then I think in terms of applying for like regular jobs, we're told as athletes, hey, what you do, the best athletes are so appealing for job interviews, and you're going to get hired so fast because you're an athlete. You're not able to work or take on internships or make any money while you're an athlete. And if you're a walk-on, you're probably burying yourself in student debt, but it's all going to be worth it because, oh my gosh, you're going to be the first one they hire to make 40K at this job. And now you've got this mountain of debt, and there's a lot to get into there. But all that to say, I think my argument, and I think you'd agree, Tim, and I want to hear your thoughts on this too, but like what you do as an athlete, probably it prepares you to be an incredible employee if that's the way you're designed and you're wired. And I think if I were to take a job at a company, it would be challenging. I'd have to learn how to do it, but I could be an amazing employee. But it really does set you up to attack entrepreneurship differently with an advantage and lean into that, get in touch with how that helps enable you to do it. The other thing I've experienced is not one client, not one prospect, not one agency partner, nobody has asked me about my life as an athlete, as a business owner. Nobody. And that can be crushing, but it's like what you're saying, Tim. That doesn't mean it doesn't matter. That just means you have to internalize it and keep those things internal and know for yourself that you're more prepared. So the thing is, don't go build a business based on like, I was a star athlete, so I'm going to be a good realtor. You need to be, I'm a good realtor, so I'll be a good realtor. And then like use those things as an athlete. So that's super long-winded, dude. You're gonna have to cut some of that out. But I want to hear your answer. But there's a slight rant. Probably because I'm just coming from a tough place these days, so I'm like fired up about it. But that's that's my heart right now.
No, I think you've got to be good at what you do. And so I think that was a crutch coming out of college, thinking that like, oh yeah, my past experience as an athlete is going to somehow help me. I can lean on that, right? And you can't. Like pretty much immediately, you realize that crutch gets kicked out from underneath you, and you're like, all right, what am I going to stand on? What are my skills? What am I going to do? How am I going to build a business? How am I going to do these things? And yeah, what we teach, athlete to agent, we lean more on the soft skills and all those principles that you learned as an athlete and how to translate those into a good real estate business. But we don't teach like, hey, I was an athlete, here's why you should work with me. Essentially. So
exactly.
We don't like sell that. That's not because, who cares if you're an athlete? You could have been the worst one on the team. And so there's really not much to stand on there. But man, the soft skills that you learned as an athlete in the weight room, on the track, putting in the hours, making goals, collaborating with teammates, learning how to be coached, learning how to coach. Those are things that are super, super valuable across a wide genre of businesses. And this is why in Life After Athletics, I'm talking to you who runs a marketing company. I'm not just talking to like people who have gotten into real estate because like you said, I think that there's a lot of skills, sure, that would translate well into being a great employee as an athlete, but a lot of what made most athletes successful translates really, really well for people. And it kind of just gives them a head start. Whereas like a lot of people who weren't former athletes, they're not starting from the same ground as you. Like you have those soft skills built. We just have to unlock them. I got to show you, I got to teach you how they translate into this business. I got to speak your language first and show you that. And so that's kind of what we've been focusing on and ultimately that idea just came from ourselves. I think my biggest tip to current and former athletes and kind of a trick that helps prepare their mindset for what's to come if they're looking to build a business is start surrounding yourself. And I look at the 5 closest guys to me right now, and it's kind of amazing how it's naturally happened. I don't actually know that I've given thought into this. I don't exclude people who aren't building businesses, but I think the 5 closest relationships I have, and it's most of them, like 3 out of the 5, maybe 4 out of 5, are former athletes in some capacity, and they're building businesses. And so I would say find someone if you don't already have someone, or find a group of people and start surrounding yourselves with people with the same vision. Because as you go down this path, you will realize that there are not a lot of people doing it. And not a lot of people will understand the struggles that you're going through. Not a lot of people will understand the hurdles that you're up against. Not a lot of people will understand the fear that you might have or the instability that you might have. And so you have to get somebody in your life that can relate to that, that can speak into it, even if they don't have as much experience. They don't have to be like a mentor. Like they just have to be you and me walking the same path. We're just bouncing ideas off each other, sharing what didn't work, sharing what worked. Like that right there is enough to kind of keep you going. And so I think that that's been the biggest piece of advice that I would give somebody. That helps you move the needle. That helps you keep pushing down the road. That helps you keep logging the mileage, helps you keep waking up in the morning and sticking to your routine. Like that is what keeps it going. And so surrounding yourself with like-minded people who have, that similar common interest is really important. Yeah, man, there's a lot of gold nuggets to recap in this. And I'm definitely going to have to clip some of this stuff because I think you dropped some bombshells, like 3 or 4 of them that I was like, oh, this is so good. Like, yes.
Thanks, man.
And what people don't understand is this, like, we're jumping on a podcast and we're recording this. This is what I mean. When we surround ourselves with people who are like-minded, like you and I, this is like a normal coffee conversation that we have, like these aren't new concepts. We're not like putting on a show or performing, I might ask a little bit more intentional questions, but like, this is part of our normal ongoing, how do we do business? How do we relay things to each other? How do we grow? It's always this growth mindset. And so, I'm excited to kind of split some of those things that you said and be able to, share those gold nuggets as we wrap this up. I want to shout your business out real quick. Obviously, South Mountain Messaging. How do people get a hold of you, and how would they start working with you?
Yeah, southmountainmessaging.com is the website. So that's where you can book a call with me. I still take all my team member doesn't take those, so I'll take the first call with you if you want to talk to me personally about marketing stuff or the story brand framework. That's the best way to do it. LinkedIn as well, Jonny Holsten, Johnny without an H, and my name will be on the show somewhere. To talk business, that's the best way to do it. If you just want to talk life or get connected with me and see more non-work stuff, my Instagram is kind of the way to view that. So Jonny Holsten is the Instagram. So,
without an H, I always have to remember when I'm typing it. JONNY.
Yeah, 100%. And our services are story brand marketing, website copywriting, email copywriting, and looking at your business and figuring out what's the first revenue we can drive for you with the skills that we're good at is what we're really focusing on now. So if you know a business owner that could use a kickstart in their marketing, South Mountain is the place to start.
Love it. Well, I've been sharing you all over. I speak highly of you. You've been an awesome friend and an awesome asset as a business owner to me over the past few years. And I'm excited to kind of see where things progress. Thanks for jumping on the call. Thanks for sharing a bunch of gold with everybody listening, and catch you next time.
Sweet.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, dude. Hope that was good.